I know everyone is lusting after that killer iPhone 16 deal this sale season, but why? Especially when you have awesome Android flagship alternatives for much lower price, by the way. Take the iQOO 13 for example. Firstly, it's been discounted down to around 50,000 rupees, and for that price, you get some killer specs. You get Snapdragon 8 Elite, you get 144Hz LTPO AMOLED display, you get a 6000 mAh silicon carbon battery, you get a proper triple camera setup, an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, and a whole lot more. So should you actually go for the iPhone 16 or pick something like the iQOO 13 instead? Well, stay tuned with me and I'll help you make that decision in our first sale season comparison. Alright, if you're watching me for the first time, I'm Eshad. This is Track and Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Fundamentally, the iQOO 13 is a larger phone than the iPhone 16, so the device size preference will completely depend on you. But let me tell you about the build quality differences. See, both are built really well and both have like a glass and metal sandwich design along with a boxy design as well. But what I like about the iQOO 13 is that there are these slight curves on the rear, so it makes it easier to hold considering that it's a large phone, right? And with the iPhone, what you get is IP68 rating and ceramic shield protection, whereas with the iQOO, you get a slightly better IP69 rating and short sensation alpha glass protection. But one thing I've noticed in our testing is that the iPhone 16's scratch resistance is really bad, which is possibly the reason why Apple had to improve the scratch resistance by up to 3x with the iPhone 17. With the iQOO 13 short sensation alpha, we have not seen any such problems. The iPhone does have a couple of extra buttons. You get the action button, which is kind of useful. You can repurpose it, and you get the absolutely useless camera control button. 1 year later, I'm still not using it. In fact, here's a fun fact again. In the iPhone 17 Pro video where they were showcasing the device, they didn't even use the camera control button in their very own ad. They were actually using the on-screen shutter button. The iQOO 13 obviously doesn't have any of these extra buttons, but it has other useful features over the iPhone 16. For example, you get a Type-C 3.2 port at the bottom as opposed to Type-C 2.0 with the iPhone 16. Of course, which means faster data transfer speeds. Again, when you look at the Android side of things, the hardware generally is better than iPhone. And you also do get an infrared blaster with which you can control your AC, your TV, all of those things just with the phone. And the one interesting thing about the iQOO 13 is the RGB LED lights, around the camera module, which works as a good notification light for your incoming messages and calls. And even when you look at the display of both these phones, the iQOO 13 has superior specs for sure. Because what you get is a superior resolution, you get higher brightness both indoors and outdoors. Of course, you get 144Hz refresh rate with LTPO technology over iPhone's 60Hz, which is so old school now. And you get much better PWM dimming as well. The good thing with the iPhone display is that the color accuracy is obviously going to be fantastic because Apple, cares about those things. So if you're watching Netflix or YouTube, it's going to be great. Especially the HDR tuning is also going to be great. But that's also true for the iQOO display. And you know that watching content is not just about the display experience. You also need good sound, and both these phones come with stereo speakers and both do sound really good. But iQOO has one proper advantage. Now, if you're somebody like me who prefers listening to music with LHDC or LDAC codecs, then the iQOO supports it. Apple does not. Now, performance in the iQOO 13 with the Snapdragon 8 Elite LPDDR5X Ultra RAM type and UFS 4.1 storage is top tier, obviously, right? And when you compare the Snapdragon 8 Elite to the A18 Pro, all of 2025 Snapdragon 8 Elite has actually outperformed the A18 Pro in terms of raw performance. Yes, the iPhone 16's A18 has a higher single-core performance in Geekbench, but the multi-core performance is higher with the iQOO 13. Even the gaming performance, especially when you compare the 3D Mark numbers, is better on the iQOO 13 compared to the iPhone 16. In fact, the iQOO 13 also has a supercomputing Q2 chip, which is like an extra chip which allows you to do a bunch of different things. For example, there's a super resolution mode which scales up the resolution dynamically. You also do get game frame interpolation, which is damn cool, obviously, because you get extra frame rates. And with bypass charging, you can actually use the phone even when it's charging without the phone getting hot. In fact, the iQOO 13 performed really well in our Genshin Impact test 2, where we played the game at highest graphics targeting 60 FPS, and we did get 60 FPS for the 30-minute session that we ran. Of course, the iPhone 16's performance is also equally good, and the bigger advantage is that the iQOO 13 has a larger display and a flat display, which makes it, perfect for gamers who are looking for a better gaming experience. Compared to the iPhone 16's 6.1-inch display, the gaming experience should be better on the iQOO 13. Unless you want to play AAA titles like Death Stranding, which is currently available only on the iPhone. However, let me tell you a secret. There are a bunch of folks who've tested out PC emulation for the same games, for example, Death Stranding or Resident Evil, with Snapdragon 8 Elite phones, just like the iQOO 13. And they found out that Snapdragon 8 Elite offers better performance at higher resolution than the iPhone 16, despite not having an official port. So So imagine if the official port did come to Android. The performance would be much better. And I don't even have to say this, you will get better battery life and faster charging speeds with the iQOO 13 compared to the iPhone 16. Now, if you compare the cameras, iPhone does capture better video recording than iQOO, and iPhone's primary camera also captures more details and better skin tones, especially with the primary camera and the selfie camera. However, the one distinctive advantage with the iQOO camera is that you get a proper 2x optical zoom lens, and the iPhone doesn't have a telephoto camera, and with that 2x you also can crop into 4x without too much loss of details. And the advantage of having that 2x camera plus the 4x lossless is that you get multiple focal lengths if you're shooting portrait shots. And in general, the portraits from the iQOO 13 actually do look pretty impressive, so does the iPhone 16. But one area where I do prefer iQOO's performance in terms of camera experience over the iPhone is definitely in the HDR tuning. Moreover, I also tested out AI erase on both the phones, and that's where iQOO actually does a better job than iPhone. In fact, iPhone's AI erase is not that great compared to most other Android flagships out there. So if I have to break it down, keep it simple for you: iPhone for videos, iQOO for camera versatility. Now finally, let's talk about the software experience. It's like comparing apples to Androids. Bad joke. Just forgive me. Point is, if you've used an iPhone with iOS all your life, you're not gonna like the FunTouchOS experience. And if you've used an Android phone all your life, then you're not gonna like the iOS experience. But if we have to compare the two in terms of which one feels more premium, I would say that iOS feels more premium compared to FunTouch. That said, I must mention one thing here. What we've generally noticed with FunTouch on not just the iQOO 13, but every other Vivo iQOO phone that we've tested is that it's mostly been a bug-free experience. The same cannot be said about iOS anymore. Whether it's iOS 18 or the new iOS 26 beta, bugs are galore on the iPhone. Do iPhone users agree about this or not? Let me know in the comments. Now, truth be told, I know that it's very difficult to convince an iPhone fanboy or fangirl to buy an Android flagship. In fact, it's next to impossible. But for anyone who has never purchased an iPhone, and probably the iPhone 16 is going to be their first iPhone, why just, pick up an Android flagship like the iQOO 13 instead? Because the amount of hardware that you get for the money is just leagues better than what the iPhone offers, at least the iPhone 16 offers. And in fact, if you do want to buy an iPhone, I would suggest picking up the iPhone 17 instead, because this year Apple has leveled up with the iPhone 17 by giving you ProMotion displays, right? The iPhone 16, very difficult to recommend now. The iQOO 13, on the other hand, still a very good recommendation and still an underrated phone. So what do you guys think of the iQOO 13 over the iPhone 16, or do you still think that the iPhone 16 is a better buy? Let me know. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.